Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, the remakes of Pokemon Red and Blue, the first ever Pokemon games to come out. No, the definitive third version games like Yellow and Crystal, those aren't remakes. This came out after Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire and used the Gen 3 sprites and the overworld world design, except now it's being used for the Kanto region. Obviously, because this is a remake, I think we have to show what we were working with before, the first generation. The buggiest and most broken state of Pokemon to ever exist. Screen dragging to break cutscenes, the most common of soft locks you can imagine. Terrible Pokemon designs. And the best, of course, superior and utterly broken Pokemon types. Specifically how broken the Psychic type was, I mean, just look at it. To start with how this game worked, let's start with the stat distributions, and they were actually a bit different than how it is in Fire and Red and Leaf Green. Special defense and special attack were considered one stat, just simply known as the special stat. So that meant if a Pokemon were to have a special stat of, let's say, 100, that's 100 in both special defense and in special attack. Add that statistic to a Pokemon with virtually no weaknesses, and what do you get? The Psychic type. I say it had no weaknesses because it was only weak to Bug at the time, and if you didn't know, Bug types were god-awful. The best option for dealing bug damage isn't even a bug-type Pokemon. While I was trying to struggle to find commentary during my playthrough for the 2 hours I was trying to catch Mewtwo, I mentioned why I love Jolteon so much, and that it actually originated from Gen 1. Here's another history lesson on stupid stats in Gen 1. Critical hits were actually based on how fast Pokemon were. Let's say you had a Persian. That would crit more often than a Pokemon than, let's say, Slowpoke. They took speed into consideration when calculating the crit damage, and add that to a fact that Persian learns Slash, it's guaranteed to get a crit every single time. Jolteon is also a super fast Pokemon, so therefore it'll get a lot of criticals. One of the moves that it learns in Gen 1 is called Pin Missile, a not very powerful bug type move, but it hits 2 to 5 times. That's the main drawing point to it. A super fast bug user that got crits often was your best way of dealing damage with Psychic types in this generation. It's not even a bug type Pokemon, for crying out loud. I'm also led to believe that there was a programming error because it's mentioned that Psychic Pokemon were supposed to be weak to Ghost, but in reality they weren't. It gets fixed in later generations, but it's not like it matters anyway because the only Ghost type family in this game is part Poison type, so it's weak to Psychic anyways. I think that's enough yapping about the problems with Generation 1 though. This video is really about how good the first ever remake is. What does it change? Were those changes beneficial or did they make the game worse? What new content does it add? How faithful is it to the older generation? These are the questions I want to answer while I talk about this game. I'm going to do so by summarizing the game. So grab a snack and join along because this is going to be quite the journey. Oh yeah, also if you want to see my playthrough of this instead of me just summarizing Kanto, I also have that linked. I've mentioned it before, but it was my first ever Let's Play, so it's going to have some problems. I know, don't be too harsh on it. I tried. I don't have a script for those like I do with this. Alright, starting the game. Pallet Town and that iconic theme. What can I say? Professor Oak stops you before you try and commit the biggest sin in Pokemon, which is walking into grass without a Pokemon, so that he can force you into his work field by completing the Pokedex. Because this child doesn't know how to say a damn word. You're just naturally forced into this and hooray, you get your own Pokemon. That's how all of these journeys start. This is the part of Pokemon in which I try to emphasize the most. There are so many different Pokemon and undoubtedly there are going to be some terrible ones. But in saying that, that is completely my opinion. Why I think Flareon is the worst evolution is the same reason why some delusional kid enjoys it. With these Pokemon bios that I do, I tell you what you need to know or want to know and how they can be used in your party. The starters are with you from the beginning, and the early game is arguably the hardest part of the game and with how limited your Pokemon options are. If the first gym is a rock type gym and you want to pick a Charmander, which is weak to rock, I'm going to point out that you might want to find another partner to complement it immediately. If there's a super fun strategy with another Pokemon like Bulbasaur, I'm going to tell you that it's a really good strategy if you want to pick him. I mean, sleeping and sweeping is this little guy's staple moveset. Anyways, after picking a starter, you have your classic tutorial rival battle, which is literally just spamming your only attacking move until you win. Or lose because of an unlucky crit. Oh yeah, also, did I mention if you check your PC in your house, there's a free potion? I'm surprised that not a lot of people know that. The game kind of directs you into the direction you need to go, and once you move to the next city, you stop by the Pokemart, get Oak's parcel, and deliver back to him. Now you can kind of start on your adventure. In Viridian, there's this optional rival battle, I kind of miss when there were optional rival battles. It's not something you had to do, but if you wanted some experience and was in desperate need, you'd always have this. Or if you were a speedrunner and you didn't need to, you could skip it. Gives you a lot of choice. Oh yeah, also there's this catching tutorial. You keep exploring and eventually get brought to your first dungeon, which is this forest, and introduces you to your first trainer battle other than your rival. Trainer battles will reward you with more experience points than wild Pokemon, and you also get money from them. In return, you can't run from them. Once you make it out of here, you finally get into a town with a gym that you can walk into. This is where we see our first notable change from the original games. The gyms consist of a couple test trainers that are optional and a gym leader. Just know that if you skip the test trainers, you can never challenge them after the gym leader is defeated. Each gym only uses one type the entire game. To me, it's alright, I guess. I don't want to compare it to anything except Red and Blue, but this is an exception. I have always found Falconer and Flint from Diamond and Pearl to be so cool. I know the entire thing is supposed to be monotype, but when he threw out a water-type Pokemon in his electric-type gym, I was like, whoa, wait, hold on here, that's not right. I think having standout Pokemon like this with moves of the same type of the gym, but different typings of the Pokemon is so cool. It genuinely challenges you, and you might have to even change an entire strategy you're using. If a gym is one exact type the entire time, it leads to the player just spamming the super effective move the entire time, and it gets quite boring. That's why in the playthrough sometimes I send out a lot of weird matchups to make it more interesting. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that take about how we need more Flint and Falconers, but f it, I enjoyed those fights. Anyways, back on topic. Brock, despite being a rock-type user in the original games, neither of his Pokemon had a rock-type move. In the remakes, this was changed. His ace Pokemon, Onix, was given Rock Tomb, which, to be fair at this point of the game, is a good change. Rock Tomb later on is not a good move, so. You get your first badge, finally you can run on to the next city. Our first cave leads us to an encounter with the evil team in this game, Team Rocket. Their whole thing is that they're just an organization that wants to sell Pokemon for their own profit. The reason they're in this cave? The Pokemon fossils. You only get one in this cave, but I really don't think it matters. You don't get to revive the fossils until right before the 7th gym. It revives at level 5. All of your Pokemon are going to be mid to high level 40s at this point. Both of these are water rock types, and guess what? You will need a water type that knows surf to get there. They bring these way too late into the game. The only fossil worth getting is Aerodactyl, because that guy's legit a sweeper that isn't water rock. He is very good. In the original Pokemon Red and Blue, the fossils revived at level 30. I have no idea why they made this change, but it genuinely sucks. There's no reason to put it on your team unless you want to go out of your way. You can't just slot it in naturally. Either way, you're going to have to train it up, but now it's even harder of a process. Once you get past the cave, on to the next city and another rival battle. There's a bit of a level change. Pidgeotto is down a level, but the useless Abra gained a level. He has 3 Pokemon plus a bottom feeder. Pretty tough fight if we're not prepared, but otherwise it's pretty easy. You have to go to Bill's house in order to get a ticket to the ship. That'll be important later. Now you can take on the gym. Everyone's favorite anime character, Misty. Why do we like her again? This gym is hella easy if you pick Bulbasaur. Once again, the moveset for the ace Pokemon has changed. Starmie is given Recover, Rapid Spin, Swift, and Water Pulse in the remake. In the original games, it was only Tackle, Water Gun, and Bubble Beam. Definitely a more challenging moveset here. I think that was the focus for these newer games, was giving better movesets for these Pokemon, and for these first few gyms, they worked quite well. After that, you get the TM for Dig from a Team Rocket grunt. I always find it hilarious that police struggle Team Rocket, and here we are, a 12-year-old wiping them like it's a Wendy's floor on a closing shift. There's a holdup moving to the next city, so I guess we gotta go through the underground path to get to another town, Vermilion. The gym is behind an uncuttable tree, and this is where we need that ship ticket, the SS Anne. Welcome to another rival fight. All of your rivals' Pokemon have evolved at least one stage. That means that bottom feeder Abra now has an attacking move, and holy shit, this thing is scary. The Psychic type being moderately fixed, like having a Dark type introduced, only the moves in the remake. The Ghost type being strong against Psychics, and the special stats being split. This thing is still a beast. Once you beat him though, you get your first of many HMs. These are moves that you will need. Yes, need, not want, need, in order to progress through the game. That's also how we get to the gym. Okay, let's be real here. Why is this gym design like this? I hate this. It's quite literally just luck and guessing. It's up to chance whether or not you get to challenge the gym leader or not. How does it even correspond with the electric type other than the gate? To make matters worse, every single game that this gym appears in, this is the design. And Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, they even fuck with you and paint a trash can red and blue. You then think, oh, maybe it's just those two. No! You click on them and it's just... what the f? Despite this terrible decision, I absolutely love Lieutenant Surge. He's probably my favorite Kanto gym leader. The American stereotype is just so... God, I love him. The electric type is also a very tricky type at this point in the game. The options at this point are Geodude, Onix, and Diglett. All of them are terrible in some way, but Diglett is easily the best way if you want a permanent team member. His Pokemon are given quite the buff in this game, with both his Pikachu and Raichu being given double team. Another move to make these fights an attempt at being harder than the originals. With the gym down, a Snorlax blocking our path, and HM01 cut in our hands, we had to go back to Cerulean and go all the way around that other way, and oh hey, another cave. Before I forget to mention this, talk to the fan club guy and bring that voucher that he gives you back to the bike shop. You'll get a free bike. This cave brings about a major issue that I have with this game. The amount of things that are super helpful to the player that it doesn't tell you about. You walk into this cave and you're like, oh, well shit, what do I do now? Oh, I'll tell you how this cave can be made easier. Catch 10 different species of Pokemon, go all the way through Diglett Tunnel into this building, talk to the aide, and receive another HM. Teach that to an HM user because this move sucks, and then progress through the cave. Nowhere does it mention that you'll want to have this. Nowhere does it even mention that this move exists. It doesn't even mention where you can get this. Unless you know this by heart or know how to get through this cave by memory, I guarantee as soon as you hit this cave, you'll put the game down and look up the solution or a map. I love the freedom this game has, but the oh so very little amount of direction this game does give you makes it all the more confusing for new players. And this game was made at a time where the Pokemon series was considered a newer franchise. They were only in the 3rd generation, whereas now we're in like the 9th generation. I had a friend who wanted me to help him play Pokemon and wanted to teach him the basics. I had recommended FireRed and played along with him because to me it's the most box standard Pokemon game you can get. I spent at least 75% of my time just directing him where to go next, because the game never even mentions where you go next, let alone hint at it. It's just expected that you know. That reaches us to Lavender Town, in which that issue I just brought up appears again. You explore the Pokemon Tower, but only for a floor because you don't have a certain item, and meet your rival for another fight. This to me is the hardest rival fight in the game. He has 5 Pokemon, all of them powerful in their own right. If you picked a Bulbasaur, he now has 2 Psychic-type Pokemon. This is also where his team starts to be starter-dependent. If you pick Bulbasaur per se, he has an Exeggcute and Gyarados. Squirtle users will have to deal with a Growlithe and Gyarados. And Charmander users will have to deal with a Growlithe and Exeggcute. He basically completes the Water, Grass, Fire trio with the ones he doesn't have already. Boy, is that Gyarados scary in both versions, Red and Blue and FireRed and LeafGreen. In the original games, he has Hydro Pump and Dragon Rage. Yes, the Hydro Pump, that was 120 base power in that game, same type attack bonus. In the remakes, it's a tiny bit easier, but not much. He has no water type move and instead is given Thrash, which is just as strong given that it's using its superior attack stat. You will get wiped here if you do not plan cautiously. You then actually have to move on to Celadon, which is probably the biggest city in terms of content. I mean, like, in both versions, you have the department store, free Eevee, gambling, Team Rocket hideout, the gym. There's just a lot to do in the city. We learned that you can buy Pokemon from gambling, and ho, it's Team Rocket's hideout under the game corner. I wonder if there's any correlation. Actually, yeah, they just straight up tell you. You go through the Rocket Warehouse to get the Self Scope, and it's in here that you meet the boss, Giovanni. I'm not gonna lie, he's weak and not intimidating whatsoever, especially when you have an Onix on your team. To proclaim yourself as the greatest trainer and then have one of the weakest teams aside from Kangaskhan is honestly laughable. I mean, in the original games, his Rhyhorn only knew Horn Attack. His fights don't get harder either, they stay basically the same difficulty and you only need 1 or 2 Pokemon to sweep his team. I don't think bosses can be taken seriously until Gen 4 with Cyrus. All these other bosses before then were all just pushovers. The gym of the city is also a cakewalk and actually has no changes from the originals. You can take the Silph Scope back to the Pokemon Tower and you go all the way up to the top and find even more Rocket Grunts. Mr. Fuji gives you another useful item as we can now wake up those sleeping Snorlaxes in our way. But wait, there's actually a choice on which gym you can take on next. Back in Celadon, you can get a tea or a drink from the vending machines at the top of the hotel to give to the guard to get to Saffron, the city that we haven't been able to get to since Cerulean. Or you can go to Fuchsia through either the bike path or the Snorlax path. I personally think you should go to Fuchsia City first if you're inexperienced and you're playing this for the first time. Here's an idea. How about we make a zone that forces you to pay money and make that part of the game a required part in order to progress? Welcome to the Safari Zone. You only have a limited amount of steps to reach the end of the maze. You need this HM to progress through the game, and I've always found this part of the game as the most tedious part that I never want to go through. So coming up will be mostly a large amount of negatives. I mean, seriously, if you run out of steps, you have to restart the entire thing and pay again. I don't want to spoil my playthrough, but that exact thing happened to me in my run. I ran out of steps right before making it to the guy. I was even in the building. There are so many useful items in here too, it's almost like they encourage you to use more than one attempt. This is also a part of the game in which you can soft lock and never progress further. If you have beaten every trainer up to this point, have no sellable items, and have less than $500, you can't go into the Safari Zone, making it so that you have to restart from your last save point, or either restart the entire game to progress if your last save point was like right before the Safari Zone. I have no hate towards the Safari Zone. I find the concept amazing, but making it forced is such a terrible choice for a game. Another shitty thing about this part is that in order to get the HM move for strength, you have to find an item that's not required. You go down here to get this item to find the Warden's Gold Teeth. Let me remind you that it's completely optional and only told to you by a sign in which you can just completely go right around. Then give the gold teeth back to him. Strength isn't a required HM all the way until Victory Road, and at that point it's like, why? Anyways, let's talk about the gym. These walls aren't completely invisible. The squares that have the white specks in their corners are actually what your barriers are, and that's how you get around. This proclaimed poison type gym has psychic, ground, and poison types. I know I quite literally just said I like this type of stuff, but none of these Pokemon have a single poison type move. I found it justifiable in those fights because they have electric type moves to complement its off type. In this game, it's just here just because, no theme for the off type. Onto the gym leader himself, Koga. I find this to be the worst gym leader in Kanto, and that's tough to say because later on in the series, he becomes quite the strong trainer, and I personally really like Koga. The poison type, alongside water, was the most introduced type in this game, and in Gen 1. So why does he only use 2 families, the Weezing and Muck evolution lines? Even worse, in Pokemon Yellow, all he uses are Venonats and 1 Venomoth. 1 family! 1! There are so many respectable poison types. One of the things I like about Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is that they fixed this team. A Weezing, Muck, Venomoth, and Golbat. Even better, his rematch team adds a Tentacruel. One of the things I find to be the low point of these games are the late gyms. The beginning gyms gave you somewhat of a challenge because of the Pokemon that you fought that you haven't seen at any point in the game. Onix, the Staryu family, Raichu, Tangela. We see these coughings so often with the abundance of poison types that Team Rocket has. I guess they didn't want him to collide with all those Pokemon, but even that leaves you with Tentacruel, Golbat, Beedrill, Venomoth, Arbok. I don't know, man. Koga is cool as hell. His gym fight just sucks. Alright, on to Saffron City. I prefer doing this city second because once again, there's a lot to do and the gym is the almighty psychic type. First, you get to explore all of Silphco, which has not only Giovanni, but a fight with your rival. Trust me, 12 floors of exploration just to be greeted by this guy is pretty irritating. I would just like to mention that I consider his Gyarados weaker in this fight, and for those that have to deal with it, no more Thrash and instead gets Twister and Dragon Rage. At this point, a constant 40 damage is 3-tap, and Twister is hella weak. Also, his Kadabra is an Alakazam now, so after defeating your rival, you get a free Pokemon. Lapras is really good. If you still, for some reason, wanted to use that fossil from long ago, this just simply collapsed all reasoning in wanting to do so, unless you want to be different. A change made in this game that I actually enjoy is that the Lapras received is level 25, compared to the level 20 that you got it at in Red and Blue. Oh look, Giovanni's only scary Pokemon is now his lowest leveled Mon. How tragic. Once you defeat Giovanni, he claims to disband Team Rocket because you hurt his ego, and this guy claims to be so rich that he can give you whatever you want. Master Ball. Before taking on the gym, you can receive another free Pokemon with either Hitmonlee or Hitmonchan. This is dumb as f because we're literally about to take on a Psychic type gym in case you forgot. Fighting is weak to Psychic. I do like free Pokemon, they feel like a reward. But just imagine the first time playing this and you want to carry a Hitmonlee on your team to the next gym, then it just gets obliterated the first time you ever send it out. Probably led many people to believe that these things are absolute garbage. Welcome to everyone's favorite girl who whips her Pokemon. Welcome to everyone's favorite girl who believed physics and psychics are the same thing because a spoon bent in front of her. Okay, but seriously, she claims to not enjoy Pokemon battling, then the game designers took that as, oh, I got it. Let's give her a whip. Okay, but like, this fight is actually hard. Alakazam plus the Venomoth with Psybeam. See, look, you can do this outcast Pokemon thing properly. I like that. After the gym, the game once again doesn't guide you in the right direction, and you're kind of just left expecting to know what to do next. We'll go to this terminal, look through the binoculars, and see this cool bird. Then, you have two ways to go to the next place. One, go through Pallet Town, which requires HMO2 Fly, which once again, never ever mentioned what it is or how to get it. Or two, surf through a dungeon. Naturally, I would choose to surf through the dungeon because, oh hey look, that bird that we just saw. Legendary Pokemon now are a staple of the franchise. Pokemon with outrageous stats and moves that are powerful beings and lore. Except there's not much lore here, except for the fact that these three birds count to 3 in Spanish. Articuno controls anything related to ice at its will. That's all you're getting from this game. Same thing for Zapdos with electricity, Moltres for fire, which comes way later. Make your way to Cinnabar Island and holy, you can finally get your fossil Pokemon. Yeah, that long of a wait. I'm glad later games made it so you can get them way earlier. In fact, speaking upon this topic, I think it would have been okay in this game still because, as previously mentioned, in the original games they were given to you at level 30. League's better than level 5. I still have no idea why they made this change. Also, they come to you poisoned. The gym doors are locked for some reason, which forces you to explore this mansion and find the keys in there. There's a ton of lore regarding legendary Pokemon here, specifically around the creation of Mewtwo. He was tested on so much that he became violent and escaped. That's just like a sentence summary, it's somewhat deeper than that. I hate the quiz design. I think this scenario is the only time it's okay. Even if you get it right, you still have the option to fight the trainer. Or you can just completely ignore the quiz and progress by challenging the trainer in its own right. Unlike later games where it's forced upon you. It's even called out in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. You know it's stupid when writers joke about how dumb the thing is. I've always wondered why Blaine only has 2 fire-type family Pokemon. Then I realized the other fire types in this game that aren't legendary are Charizard, Magmar, and Flareon. In Leaf Green, you'd have access to Ninetales. Yeah, never mind. I see why now. Welcome to the new content in FireRed and Leaf Green. I haven't been mentioning what's new because genuinely the only changes have been levels and movesets. Everything else has been completely the same. This is the first actual difference in content, so all of this you see is only FireRed Leaf Green, the Sevi Islands. Basically, the only reason you care about this is because this is how they introduce you to what's to become of our post-game content. You explore the first 3 islands and encounter the final legendary bird, rescue a lost girl, and yeah, that's about it. You're forced to stay here until these 2 do their business. Trust me, it'll be a tiny bit more interesting later. Viridian's gym is now open. Who's the gym leader? Giovanni. What? And don't get me wrong, I love a good plot twist, but this one just absolutely makes no sense. Team Rocket is regarded as a criminal group, right? What the f is their boss doing in a gym leader system? He literally has the Team Rocket emblem on his outfit. I don't understand how the boss of a criminal organization can be accepted into the gym system and everyone's just okay with it. In order for a plot twist to work, it can't contradict all previous knowledge known about said person or any past situations with involvement of said character. That's what makes a good plot twist. Is this even a plot twist? I don't even know at this point. I've dissected this game to the point where I feel like I've only been complaining about every single thing I talk about. Giovanni's fight is decent. The only thing I would change is his ace Pokemon. Why a Rhyhorn? You already have one on your team. Make it a Nidoking instead. In fact, while I'm talking about his team, he had a Rhydon in the original games to begin with. They, for some reason, reversed the evolution. Now that you have 8 badges, head on over to the Pokemon League and fight your rival one last time before the big challenge. The levels ramp up here real quick, so if you are underleveled for Giovanni, you're going to be way underleveled here. Also, if you pick Squirtle as your starter, this is the weakest his starter will ever be. Venusaur's moveset this fight is pretty bad in my opinion. The Victory Road poses a nice challenge and some good strength puzzles that are easy to figure out on your own. And bam! All of a sudden it's Elite Four time. Starting off with Bad Bitch Lorelei, she has mainly ice types with the exception of Slowbro, but it fits her team nicely, so I don't mind it. Each Pokemon in the original games will be 2 levels higher, but in this generation, Pokemon can hold items, so her Ace Lapras will be holding a Citrus Berry. All Ace Pokemon are holding one of these, so that's how you know. I gotta say, all the movesets on these Pokemon were terrible, for even the later members. A giant step up in this game. A Slowbro still carrying Water Gun. Now it knows Surf and Ice Beam, way more dangerous. Bruno is up next. He has 2 Onixes. What the f***? That immediately downgrades how serious this guy is. Carry a flying type and you're good. So you remember how I said there was only 1 ghost type introduced in this generation? Well, Game Freak thought it was a good idea to have a ghost type Elite Four member, who in reality is just a better Koga. All of her Pokemon are poison type. This, in my opinion, is where the E4 starts to get actually a bit hard. All of her Pokemon have some sort of way to inflict status ailment onto you. Confuse Ray, Hypnosis, Poison Chance. This fight really depends on how lucky you are with avoiding those ailments. Also, I never mentioned this, but thank God they got rid of this sprite. Lance is the final member and carries dragon-looking Pokemon. In reality, they're all just flying type. So, let me just say, this fight is an absolute joke in the original game. In Red and Blue, this is just about how many Hyper Beams you can tank, because the only actual Dragon-type move he had was Dragon Rage. That does 40 damage no matter what, and is essentially typeless and gets no stab for Dragon-type moves. I'm convinced it's only Dragon-type because it has the word in it. His Aerodactyl only had Normal-type moves. In this generation, it's no longer kidding because they know a move called Outrage. Attacks 2 to 3 times, getting more powerful each time, then confuses the Pokemon. This shit hits hard and is hard to work around, especially since his Dragonite has it, a pseudo-legendary. Also, the Aerodactyl has a Flying and Rock-type move now. Hooray, should have been there from the beginning. Cool, you beat the Elite Four. Now it's time for Rival Time, one last time. Holy shit, you got some levels. Back to comparing to the original fight. One of his Pokemon didn't even have a 4th move. Better yet, if you pick Squirtle, all of his Pokemon have 4 moves, so it's just plain harder for you. Once you and your rival go all out in this 6v6 all fully evolved Pokemon and equipped with a better moveset, you become the champion. Or not if you lost, I don't know, do better. The post-game is probably the most shallow it'll ever be for a Pokemon game, except for, you know, Red and Blue, but still, it's very small. Welcome back to the Sevi Islands. The main objective is to find these gems in order for this giant machine to work. So apparently all the time that we spent here before we became champion wasn't spent fixing this machine. No clue what they were doing back then. In doing so, you run into the remnants of Team Rocket, who don't know that Team Rocket was disbanded. We learned that Bad Bitch Lorelei was born and raised on these islands and that Team Rocket knew that Giovanni was a gym leader. I genuinely still don't fucking know how this plot point works, please tell me. They disband because you have the gym badge he gives out. Like, what? How does that correlate with him and Team Rocket? Was that more than just a badge? Was he a gym leader before he founded Team Rocket? I don't know. I guess it signified his defeat. I really don't know about this gym badge lore, and I will not further explain the gym situation because you no longer see Team Rocket in this game after that. Now that Team Rocket is dealt with, it's really only side quests left to do in the Battle Tower, which basically has no purpose because there's no reward. It's done much better in the DS games, trust me. With the Sevi Islands complete, there's one thing left to do. Catch the Pokemon in this cave. Mewtwo. I hate catching this thing. 154 special attack and having recover. Absolute pain to deal with. With Mewtwo out of the way, you really have nothing left to do except challenge the champion over and over again and the Battle Tower. So I guess that's all the content you can explore without cheat codes within the game or emulation AR codes. I would just like to say, despite all this complaining, these games created a foundation of what remakes should be, staying faithful to the original games while also adding new content in its own way to make it unique. The Gen 3 art style also really complements some of the towns in this game despite every route looking the same. It's on and off with this art direction for me. The best part of FireRed and LeafGreen to me is the region design. So many different ways to explore something and all of it get to the same place. Really gives an explorer the freedom they want. Although the direction in which you need to go to or the next town you need to be at could still be hinted at better. My main problem with these games is just how stupid some of the gym leaders' teams can be. I know there are limited options, but at some points in the time, that's not even an excuse anymore. These games also have significantly less bugs and overall improve the player experience. Even if the Psychic type is still virtually impossible to beat with type-effective moves, all the stepping stones created with the first 3 generations really helped solidify the Kanto experience. It created this nice foundation for the other remakes to improve upon, even if some of those games outright ignore what this game did right. That's all for me. If you enjoyed this review, I recommend watching my playthrough. Once again, don't be too harsh. My first time doing unscripted gameplay except for the Pokemon bios and gym leaders, so you know how that goes. Now that Kanto is complete, I feel like it's time to move on to Johto, so expect a playthrough of that region coming up fairly soon. That'll be much more enjoyable for me personally. Heart Gold Soul Silver was the first ever Pokemon game I played, so I have some fond memories and know a lot about that game. I really hope to create a very entertaining playthrough of Johto and only improve on what I've been doing now. I do need to end this video soon, so see ya!